What's up, new people? What's up, old people?
Who are you calling old?
Hey, I'm not calling names. I'm meaning that in the most respectful way possible, Patrick.
I'm sure.
All right, welcome everyone to Birmingham Elixir. My name is Kevin Brown. We have Josh Adams and Oliver Weiss who helped put this together. You'll see us throughout different events. We kind of trade off planning and hosting. Today they can't be with us. I think they have some exciting stuff going on in their own jobs. Today we have Jonatan Kłosko. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's Jonatan actually, but
okay.
Jonatan works too. Yeah.
Good. I figured I'd butcher that. Thank you for correcting me. And yeah, he's going to talk to us today about Livebook, which I'm really excited about. We've had other talks, with Bruce Tate about Live View, and some other people talk about Live View specific things, but I'm excited to talk specifically today about Livebook. And so he'll do his presentation and open it up, I think, for some discussion afterwards. So I'm pumped to hear from that. And this is Birmingham Elixir. And again, as always, we'll have this recording posted on the YouTube afterwards. So I'll turn it over to you.
Lovely.
Make you host.
Okay, let me try sharing the screen. Let me know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, so just to kind of see, is anybody here like not familiar with Livebook at all? Because I just want to get a sense of like what I should talk about. Because if everybody is familiar, I can probably like skip some introduction.
Why don't you
stuff.
do like a high level? I think we have one or two people that might be very new to Elixir.
Okay, lovely. So basically, Livebook is a web application for writing code notebooks that are interactive and also like collaborative. So multiple people can work on them together. And if you're familiar with like Jupyter, for example, it's something similar. It's built with Phoenix Liveview, and it tries to solve a number of problems that are currently like existing in some notebook systems. We actually just today launched the official website. So if you go to livebook.dev, you can see basically what are the core features and how to install Livebook. So if you never tried Livebook, probably the easiest way is to either use Docker, it's just a single command, or you can use Elixir, just install it from Hex, and you get a nice CLI for running the Livebook application locally. And also Fly.io, they created a launcher specifically for Livebook. So with just a few clicks, you can launch your own Livebook instance in the cloud and just play around with it. So you don't even need to have anything set up locally, and you can have a Livebook running anywhere you want, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so let me just start Livebook. I will use the CLI because it's the most convenient for me. Yeah, so that's the first thing you see. Let's create a new notebook. And what I like to say is that Livebook is kind of like IEX combined with your text editor. So you get all the interactiveness of IEX, but also the possibility to save to files, to see documentation, and ID-like features, right? So let's say we want to put some text over here. And as in IX, we can just type an arbitrary Elixir code. So let's define a variable, and we can immediately just execute the code and to see the result. We can also add Markdown content just to kind of describe whatever we are working on. And especially if you're writing something more of an article, you can just have a bunch of text and some code snippets, and people can then just download this article and evaluate all the code snippets. So this is a pretty nice use case. I think. Right, so there's an arbitrary markdown over here. Then you can insert more Elixir code, and you can refer to whatever you already defined, right? So we can just refer to this variable, and it's available to us. And as I mentioned, there is documentation and this kind of IntelliSense support. So for example, if we hover over the function, we can see all the examples. Same with modules. We can even preview variables that we defined before. So for example, here we have list, and if I hover over, I can see the value show up. We also have completion. So if I get completion, which is pretty handy. Okay, so one of the primary ideas we had for Livebook is to make the code notebooks reproducible, right? So for example, let's say I change this list over here and reevaluate this code, right? So now I can clearly see that this code over here is stale, which basically means that the output no longer reflects the reality, right? So now I need to reevaluate this code to make everything green again. So this is one point, which is like the visual indication. But the other point is that if I remove this cell completely, then again, this code is marked as stale. But when I reevaluate this code, it errors out. And this is actually not that obvious, because in tools like Jupyter, if you define a variable, it's globally defined in the memory. So like if you move the code around or remove the code, the variables are still there, which is particularly problematic if you save the notebook and then share with someone else or open it up later, because then you just don't get the same results. So this is one of the key things we wanted to address, and I think that it's like much more clear by both the visual indication and the evaluation flow itself, to kind of ensure that the code always is in a predictable state. So if everything is like evaluated and you save the notebook, then you can be positive that the next time you open the notebook, it's all gonna be just working fine as usually. Yeah. So now let's get to a more complete notebook. Here's an explore section, and you can even see more of these. And this is basically a number of notebooks that is an introduction to both Livebook and the Elixir ecosystem. So you can learn quite a lot from this section, right? So let's go to this notebook. So this is a more complete example. We can evaluate everything here. And one of the other things that you can divide the notebook into sections, right? Which are all visible over here. And this is basically for easier management, right? Because you can then move the sections around. You can delete sections. You can even link to specific sections if you want to send a link to somebody else. So basically just for easier management. You can create a very special kind of section that is said to be branching. So for example, this particular section branches from sections over here. And again, here we can access all the variables defined previously, and we can have a long-running computation, right? You can see the time going up here. And now if we insert a cell over here and try to evaluate this, you can see that it's queuing all the time, right? Because the cell above is still evaluating. But then if we have a regular section like here, the code evaluates immediately, and that's because the cell above is the section above this is branching, which means it runs in parallel and it's out of the main throw, right? So this is particularly useful if you have a very long computation running, but you still want to keep working on the data or just keep typing the code. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you a sense of what Livebook is in the basic terms. And And if you have any questions like to this introductory part, I'll be very happy to answer them. If you have any questions regarding the implementation or whatever, that will be probably a good starting point. But I know, you know, otherwise I can just keep building stuff. So let me know if you have any questions.
I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
So how you set up this localhost instance by, I think you did the using Elixir line on the,
Yep.
on the setup page. What is it actually doing so that you're able to run this? Is it like is it similar to like running an IEX session on the back end and then pulling up your localhost, and then instead of a Phoenix project, you're seeing a Livebook?
Okay, so basically, as in the install instructions, we install an e-script from Hex, right? So this binary over here, this is just like a regular e-script, so kind of like an Elixir binary. And when we run it, we basically parse the arguments, and then we start a Phoenix endpoint on localhost, right? So from that point forward, it's like a regular Phoenix application running, and we just open it up automatically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, so you're able to like assign variables and access them, but are you able, like in IEX, you can type V and like, you know, get the previous result. Are you able to do something like that in Livebook?
By previously result, you mean like, sorry. So basically, if you think about the evaluation, we kind of keep a snapshot of the variables between every Elixir cells, if that makes sense. So for example, if I define a variable over here, and then I redefine this variable and access the variable, which we can autocomplete as well. So right, so now we have access to the latest value, but the point about the reproducibility is that if now we remove this particular code, then we still get access to the previous value as defined over here. Not sure if that's exactly what you meant, but feel free to clarify.
Yeah, so like when you're in IEX, you can like, you know, evaluate a line, and then you can call the V function and it'll give you the result of the previous line, or you can pass it a line number and get the result of that line. I wondered if there was like a similar feature to Livebook.
Okay, well, so we work on like cell basic. So we store the snapshot of particular cells, like so it's not exactly the same, but I guess you can kind of accomplish that, right? We don't keep track of the whole history, but we keep track of all the variables as seen by a particular cell. Okay, so does it make sense?
Not exactly, but I can play around later. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
So you also mentioned like that it's collaborative. Could you go into like, you know?
Oh yeah,
it's collaborative.
Sure. So let's just open up another browser window. So basically, like locally, it's not as useful to be collaborative. But imagine you just deploy this to the cloud, like using the FlyIO launcher, or just, especially that we have a Docker image, so we can easily deploy this to whatever cloud we want. And then multiple people join the particular session, and right, so then you can see in real time the people, where people are in the notebook. You can even do something pretty cool, which is like pinning to somebody, right? So if I pin to the other user, then the focus moves around automatically as they move, which is pretty useful for like teaching sessions and this kind of stuff. Right, so when I insert new code, type new code, it's all being synchronized automatically between the users. And there is also a conflict resolution. So if multiple people type at once at the editor, we merged the changes to eventually came upon the same state, and like so that the intention of both users is preserved. So yeah, so that's mostly it. And what else? Okay, so one more thing I would like to show regarding the features. So let's say with IEX, you can do like IEX script mix to run in the context of an existing mix project. So using Livebook, you can do something similar by running to runtime and selecting the mix project you want to work with. So let's connect to an example application. This is just a regular Phoenix app. We automatically fetch the dependencies, compile and stuff. So now I'm in the context of set project, which means I have access to all the dependencies and all the modules. So we still have auto completion and docs for these, right? So for example, I can get the docs for the function, and if I call the function, I get all the results, right? Which opens up the possibility for another set of use cases, which is writing notebooks for your mix project and keeping them as a documentation for new developers. So then if somebody comes to your project, they can open up the notebook, run it in the context of the project, and you can have like a documentation of specific modules and examples of how to use them, how to work with database entities in this particular project, and data and the business domain. So that's one use case. And apart from the mix runtime, there is also attached runtime. So you can connect Livebook to any Elixir node out there. So even if you're running a production node, for example, you can connect to that node and run commands against this node, kind of like a remote shell, let's say. So for example, let me spawn a new node. And here I can just, well, let's kind of pretend this is a production node with some code. Okay, so now if I connect to the set node, I get access to the code. One thing to keep in mind is that if you do anything mutable in terms of like the whole runtime, so if I define a module, for example, then it becomes available in the node that we connected to, because this is actually the node that is used for evaluating everything. So whatever you run in Livebook, it actually runs in this node, right? So this module becomes available, and even if we disconnect, it's still available because this node is still running. But this again opens up a possibility for another set of use cases, which is basically creating notebooks like scripts that allow you to connect your production node, run some particular queries and this kind of stuff, and then get results, disconnect. So again, just another use case. So that's it for the runtime. There's also embedded, but that's mostly useful for nerves, because again, apart from all the install instructions I said, you can also get Livebook and running on a embedded device. So then you can just play around with the device from your browser, being connected to the actual hardware. Right. So that's it for the runtime. Okay, then a pretty relevant thing for sharing the notebooks. Let's say I have an Elixir. Let's say I have a notebook, and I want to persist the whole notebook to, let's say, put it on GitHub or anywhere else. So I can specify a file. To do that, there is a simple UI for managing the files as well. Let's create a directory. I can save the file. So now if I go to the directory, you can see that all of the content that is available here it actually persisted as regular Markdown pretty much, where Elixir cells are just Elixir snippets. And what this implies is that if somebody sends a pull request, for example, you can clearly see the diff, you can review it, you can make suggestions. If somebody goes to the GitHub and just looks at the source, it's all readable, which makes it very friendly for version control and generally to kind of share with people. Which is one of our key points again. So now, having all that said, I can just give a shot at some coding actually to showcase how you would use Livebook to, let's say, prototype a piece of code to accomplish some business task. And what I had in mind is scraping EMDB for a particular movie to get some content and display it nicely to the user. So yeah, let's name the notebook EMDB. And usually when working with actual code, you often want to bring in some dependencies. And since Elixir 1.12, we can use mix install, which again which kind of fits into the whole story of reproducibility, because with mix install, we keep the dependency list as part of the notebook. So then if we send the notebook to somebody else, they can still get the same dependencies rather than relying on some global system state, right? So let's install the dependencies. In this case, we're gonna use Requeue to make the web requests. We're gonna use Floki to parse HTML. That should be it for now. Generally, you'd like to specify the exact versions, but just to kind of speed it up, I'm gonna skip this. So now let's go to the actual web page. So let's imagine we are searching for some specific movie, like Inception, for example. So we are going to take the URL. Let's just make the request. Okay, and here we can extract the query to some variable. And one thing that that you may want to do is parameterize just introduce some kind of parameterization to your notebook, right? So in a script, you would usually just use IOGET to prompt the user for input. So similarly in Livebook, you can introduce an input, right? There's a number of different input types. Let's say in this case, just gonna be search. And having this input, you can basically just use IOGETs. You can use the same name as the input, but it's prefix matching, so you can even go way more characters over here. Okay, so we're gonna get the search. Right, so now we can move the search over here. So the whole point kind of the particular example I chose is like this is a very this is a use case where the interactiveness is very friendly, like the possibility to kind of edit everything, but yet be able to evaluate, reevaluate. It's fairly useful. So let's pattern match on the response. Okay, so having the body over here, what we want to do is like it's kind of find what the URL of the actual movie that we search for is. So for that we can parse the HTML and then extract this particular element, which would be like find list, result, and whatever the link is. Okay, so let's just parse this. And again, completion is very useful, especially if you are learning a new library. And another use case for Livebook is like creating Livebooks specifically for a library package, so people can just download the notebook and play around with the library to kind of get used to it. So we can parse the document. So now we are looking for an element, which was list result. Okay, so this is fairly good. So now we can say if there are no matches, this is just some kind of error. Otherwise, just take the first result and we extract the URL. So that's probably not what we want. Cool. So this will be the movie path, and we can construct the full URL just by concatenating with the base URL. You can also format the code with keyboard shortcuts. So this kind of quality stuff that you are used to from the editor, we try to bring the gap to kind of make it available over here. Cool. So we just prototype the getting the URL, and now what we want to do is scrape some data from the actual page. So let's just match on the result. And with this URL, we can just repeat what we did previously. So let's get the document. Okay, so let's say we want the title. So for the title, we can use probably this one. So we can see it processed correctly. And now we just need to find this element. Okay, and we can extract the text. nicer. Cool. So we can probably repeat this for like description. Again, we can see it over here, and let's take the image so we can then present this nicely. Okay. So for the image, we can get the tag, and then we can extract the source. Cool. So the question is, having all this data, I think I accidentally removed the previous code, but fortunately we can just undo all the changes, and yeah, we got all of this data. And the question would be, how would we present this data nicely in Livebook rather than just printing it to the output or whatever? And we have like a separate package that is called Kino. Let's just install it. And remember that whenever you use mix install and you want to install new dependencies, you need to restart the Elixir runtime, which is similar to like IX again. So yeah, so we restart the runtime, we install new dependencies, and Kino is basically like a package for creating widgets so that you can make some cool drawings or like present widgets from the code directly to Livebook. Yeah, and it includes support for plotting, data tables, ecto tables, ETS, Markdown, this kind of stuff that I can show later. But one of the features it supports is rendering Markdown. So that's what we're gonna use. So let's say we want the result as Markdown. So let's type something real quick. So we can have the title, description, and maybe the link to the original page. And finally, we can have the image. And now what we can do is just wrap all this Markdown in a Kino Markdown. And again, you can see the docs. You can see an example usage and stuff. So in this case, we just wrap this in a Kino struct, and it should do. Boom. And again, now having the input here, we can switch it to something else. And again, we change the input value. So now these cells are marked as stale. And if we reevaluate the code, we can see the new result over here. So this is pretty useful for prototyping because now we could just take all of this code and put it in a module and make it a part of the business logic. But the process of like coming up with all the code is very interactive, and we can very quickly iterate on the actual versions. So yeah, so that's for that. And I also mentioned Kino, right? So you can go to the explore section, and there is a bunch of examples of what you can do with Kino. I can just evaluate all of it. So we have a separate package for plotting data, and you can even make the dynamic plots where you just push new data points and it updates on the client, as we did here. Here it was just like a for loop, but there is also an option to make it run in the background forever and just keeps updating forever. without blocking the Livebook whatsoever. Then it has support for tables. It supports ETS, like the regular data tables, and also Ecto. So all of that is supported. Here's a very nice example. So we take all the process in the file system, in the system, and then we render them as a table. So we can sort by the relevant attributes to kind of identify which the interesting processes. So yeah, that's an example of how you can use Livebook to kind of introspect a remote node, assuming we connected using the attached runtime. Right, here's Markdown as we used. And yeah, so that's it for this example. One thing I would like to show is that, as I said, today we launched the official Livebook website. And one thing that we have here is a create batch feature, which basically means that you can put your Livebook URL or notebook rather. So for example, if you have some kind of notebook on GitHub, you can just place the URL here, pick the batch, copy the code, and that you can use to place it on your website or in a README. So I have an example here. So you can paste this batch again on your website or on the README. And if you navigate over here, you are redirected to our website. But we don't start the notebook anywhere specifically. Rather, you tell us where to start the notebook on, right? So I configured my local URL over here already. Otherwise, I will be asked to configure for the first time. And when I click Run Notebook, the notebook is automatically imported into my local Livebook. So then I can just play around with whatever notebook somebody shared. And you can even navigate across notebooks. So in the repo, I just show you there is an index notebook, and it has relative links to all the notebooks in the specific directories, and it just worked in Livebook. So whenever you click a link, we automatically fetch the corresponding notebook, in this case from GitHub, and you can play around. So this is particularly useful for tutorials, articles, and this kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess that's mostly it for the demo. If again you have any more questions, feel free to ask.